Welcome back. We are joined now by the Daily Beast executive editor, Hugh Dougherty, to get the download on a fascinating story about Tulsi Gabbard, Trump's pick for Director of National Intelligence, who was a former US representative for Hawaii and ran for president as a Democrat in 2020 and then left her party. And by Daily Beast Capitol Hill reporter Juliegrace Brufke for her insider download on the confirmation hearing of Heggers, aka Pete Hegseth, a military veteran and former Fox News host, of course he was, accused of sexual assault, of course he was, the perfect portfolio for a Trump defense secretary appointee. Hugh, Juliegrace, we've an embarrassment of things to discuss. Juliegrace, can you tell us what's happening in the background on the Hill there where you are right now? And is Pete Hegseth going to get confirmed as defense secretary?
So Republican leadership's feeling really good about his odds right now. They feel like he did well in that hearing. Democrats have still been railing against him. And there's a couple of outliers that haven't said they're going to support him yet. So I feel like there's some moderates or some potentially retiring members that might just kind of not care what leadership has to say. That could be a problem for him. But right now, pretty much everyone I talked to said that things are kind of looking good. They're gearing up probably a markup on everything on Monday and then probably potentially a confirmation vote Monday or Tuesday. So it's going to be interesting, but last I talked to leadership sources, things were heading, the wind was in his sails to get there. So,
wow. Is he facing any actual roadblocks now, or just a kind of a question mark from those retiring folks?
It's kind of a question mark from the moderates. I mean, we haven't heard from like Susan Collins on where she stands on this, or Lisa Murkowski would be another one to watch, or John Curtis, the new Utah senator, is taken over from Mitt Romney, who had some reservations there. But I think Joni Ernst getting on board yesterday, who probably was most vocal about reservations initially there, is a big indicator that Trump rolled his kind of pressured a lot of these people to kind of rally behind him, even some of the people that had reservations there. So it's kind of headed in his direction, and they dumped a ton of money to kind of peer pressure her into getting on board with him. So I think she's kind of a good bellwether to watch on where some of the other moderates will lie on that.
When you say they dumped money, what does that mean?
So there was a ton of money spent in Iowa kind of pressuring her, especially with threats for primaries for her in her next election. So kind of threats from people in Trump world to that they potentially derail her moving forward. So I think that was definitely kind of a factor in there. But she said she's been satisfied with his meetings, and her line of questioning yesterday, she was, I mean, softer than some anticipated there, but ultimately kind of came out and said yesterday that she's on board. So,
and of course, she's got a daughter serving in the military. Right. She served in the military herself. She's the victim of a sexual assault. So she was a sort of holdout, but she spent time with him on her own, I think, before the holidays. So they've had clearly time together, and she's obviously been convinced, and especially under the threat of being primaried, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any way to know if she organically changed her mind or is just kind of acquiescing to the enormous amount of pressure and threats.
Yeah. I think this is welcome to Trump 2.0,
right?
Smash mouth politics.
Smash mouth politics.
The MAGA caucus, or the MAGA supporters, smashed their way through that hearing. After the hearing, they said it was a triumph. They hailed Hegseth as a hero. And what did he do? Well, he was incredibly aggressive to the Democrats. He spoke the language of MAGA. He spoke about being saved by God. He didn't express shame or regret. And that's the theme of the next 4 years. That's how Trump wants people to, in his view, win. And we're going to see, I think, for the next few days, as Juliegrace is going to be covering a lot of confirmation hearings. And I doubt that we will see any that are as nakedly confrontational as Pete Hegseth with the Democrats, but it's the theme. Don't concede, don't give ground, be aggressive. And the feeling in MAGA land after that performance was that's what we want to see. This is the
Trump school of politics. Juliegrace, what is the feeling like on the Hill? Are people energized?
I mean, Democrats are kind of trying to figure out their next moves, and all of them that I talked to Tim Kaine a little bit after the hearing yesterday, and they're like, I feel like a lot of them are really upset they didn't get to see that FBI report, and that's going to be a big issue. So they're kind of just trying to rally the troops, and I doubt that he gets any Democrat support, but possibly John Fetterman. But I mean, it was kind of interesting to watch Tim Kaine of all people in that, because he's usually so unfiery to be kind of like the most intense in his line of questioning there, bringing up the extramarital affairs and really kind of taking aim at him. And a lot of Republican senators are kind of like flipping on that and really taking aim at some of the line of how Democrats handled the questioning there.
You have admitted that you had sex while you were married to wife 2 after you just had fathered a child by wife 3. You've admitted that. Now, if it had been a sexual assault, that would be disqualifying to be Secretary of Defense, wouldn't it?
It was a false claim then and a false claim now.
If it had been a sexual assault, that would be disqualifying to be Secretary of Defense, wouldn't it?
So I think that's going to be a big fundraising tool for them on how they're going to go after Democrats. And it's, I mean, it was kind of interesting to watch Mark Wayne Mullen yesterday, right after Tim Kaine, who was like, the lawmakers show up drunk at work all the time, so there shouldn't be an issue.
Hey, who among us? I'm drunk right now. I'm doing a podcast.
Well, you can be drunk on matcha, I think.
I am drunk on matcha. It's actually so funny to me, and I don't know if people feel this way, but it's like watching, I think, Marco Rubio is likely going to pretty much sail through. And having covered this world for as long as I have, it's so bizarre to me to think of Marco Rubio as the statesman who sails through, just like the voice of reason. Just by comparison, a literal genius.
So Juliegrace, what about the Republicans? I mean, are they euphoric? Is this a moment of high energy for them?
I mean, I think for MAGA world, they're very excited about some of these incoming nominees. And I mean, I think one thing to note just on getting him through, I think Matt Gaetz dropping out early kind of paved a path where there's only so many nominees that you can take out, which I think also helps Hegseth's case. But I mean, I think there's a lot of energy. I mean, especially with inauguration coming up, I feel like especially the really close Trump allies are really ramped up. I mean, in comparison to like Mattis as defense secretary last time around, they're getting a cabinet as a whole that's just much more in line with kind of that Trump world. So it's going to be more politicized.
Right. It feels much more in line with central casting. And Pete Hegseth is who you would pick to play defense secretary in a movie about the end of the world.
Great. And on that note, no, I mean, is the Hegseth, he's not the most contentious nominee at this point. There's other, I mean, which is a remarkable statement.
Which brings us on to why Hugh is here this morning. We're going to discuss La Gabbard, which is my name for her. I don't know why it's that, but it's more fun than Gabbard. Gabbard actually sounds a bit like a Yorkshire name. Gabbard.
Yeah, it's a bit stodgy.
It sounds like one of those places that you might store coal or logs. Put it in the Gabbard. Don't you think at the bottom of the garden?
Or like a kind of a claggy pudding.
Yes, maybe let's have some Gabbard with that.
Well, on the subject of claggy pudding, Tulsi Gabbard may be the candidate that's really difficult to digest for the Republicans. And there's lots of reasons for that. And one thing I want to highlight is that the Daily Beast has been investigating a very specific part of her background that has very much flown under the radar.
Mm-hmm. And
we're going to be dropping a story on her upbringing in a group called the Science of Identity Foundation.
The Science of Identity
Foundation. She, Tulsi, as people probably know, was brought up in Hawaii, but she was actually born in Samoa, and she was born to a couple who were very much part of the Hare Krishna movement, as many boomers were in the 70s. And then they became part of a group called the Science of Identity Foundation. And its leader, Chris Butler, who goes by the name Jagat Guru to his followers.
Well, I would do if I was called Chris Butler. I'd much rather be called Jagat Guru, wouldn't you?
Would.
Yes.
Yes.
Chris Butler.
If you're choosing your guru name. But he is a figure who really lives as a recluse in Hawaii, but is incredibly controversial and has some incredibly controversial things to say. And we've obtained a recording of him saying some of those things about gay rights and He was very deeply opposed to any rights for same-sex couples and said it in very explicit and offensive terms. And we'll be dropping that story on the Daily Beast website.
Are we able to play some of the tape now?
We are.
So then we're stuck in this position where we're faced with having to follow God within our heart or having to follow the law. And this is what's so sad, that they create this law. But is this not the reason why they're creating that law? Because they're not able to get people to be converted to their religion of materialism, to f***ism, voluntarily, convincing them that it's right, that it's clean, that it's spiritual, or whatever the hell they think it is, that it's normal, because they have no logic in their explanations that it's somehow normal to shove their fists up each other's anuses, and thereby are unable to convince me that it's normal, or that it's clean, or that it's not sinful, that they lick each other's anuses, or that a man is having sex with a man, or a woman with a woman. They must convert us by force.
So, is this the first time we're hearing about this?
Juliegrace will be able to talk to some of this. Doubts about exactly what went on in Tulsi Gabbard's childhood, her upbringing, and why she got into politics. It's the first time we're hearing directly from somebody that we know she has referred to as her spiritual guide. And I think many Democrats and even some Republicans are going to be interested to know exactly, is she still part of this group? Something that she has not directly engaged with as a question. And how important is Chris Butler or Jagat Guru to her? So there's going to be a lot to talk about after we've released this story.
Oh my God. Wow. This is...
And I'll just give you a tiny preview of some of the things we've been learning about Chris Butler. One is
I think you mean Jagat Guru.
Jagat Guru.
Yeah.
One is that he is deeply, deeply concerned about not coming into contact with infectious diseases, and that he would make people quarantine for up to 2 weeks. Some former followers have told us before they could come into contact with them.
Just like Putin.
Just like Putin. And also he may then be a fan of RFK Jr. Quack health theories.
These are all good questions, and we might learn at the confirmation hearing. We might learn from Tulsi. We might even learn from RFK Jr. if he's asked about it.
Juliegrace, what is the feeling about Tulsi Gabbard at the moment? We know that she does seem to be the most controversial pick at the moment, post Matt Gaetz.
I mean, I think she's going to have the toughest climb out of any of, I mean, maybe RFK Jr. He's got some issues too, but I think he probably gets some Dem support. But I mean, there's definitely, I mean, foreign surveillance is a big issue, especially with moderate and defense hawks that are going to be an issue for her. And her comments on Assad saying he wasn't the enemy back in the day is a huge thing that people are worried about. So I think she hasn't really satisfied a lot of their questions. And I've talked to senators after they've come out of these meetings where they've kind of left with more questions, where they're not totally getting what they want out of her in these one-on-one meetings. So I think there's definitely a lot of pressure for them to rally around her, but I think there's still some finessing the Trump world's probably going to have to do to get her over the finish line.
So there's no sense that Republicans are fully embracing her. It's not like they're not putting a full court press on her behalf.
I mean, I think there's definitely a press happening, and there's a lot of individual meetings going one-on-one. But I think, given the national security aspects of it, and I mean, Hegseth's kind of firebrandy and Trumpy, but I think there are some people that have some real concerns, given the nature of the job, that could make it tougher for her.
And I think what we're going to see play out in the next few days is Republicans seeing how pressured can they be by MAGA. If you can draw a line between MAGA and Republicans, MAGA has had this real boost from Pete Hegseth. Are they going to use that to push Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. over the line if there is a problem, or are they not going to? And we don't know. We really don't have any sense yet of quite how invested they are. And maybe we will after the inauguration.
And Juliegrace, I'd be interested in your point of view on this. We are so used to seeing men get angry in those seats. Brett Kavanaugh is the sort of perfect example. It's very different watching a woman get angry. It sort of triggers a different response, I think, in a crowd. Do you think she will perform well at the Senate hearing?
I think she's articulate. She helped play Kamala when prepping debate prep for Trump. So, I mean, I think she kind of knows how to work a room. She's been in Congress. She understands how these things work. And I feel like she's kind of just, her general personality is pretty even keeled. So I don't think it's going to be wildly combative. But it's going to be interesting. She's going to get pressed on some pretty hard issues. So it's going to be kind of interesting to see how she navigates it there. But I don't see her getting in shouting matches with members. I mean, I've seen crazier things happen, but I think just from her general MO,
You mentioned Assad earlier and her defense of Syria, and of course she visited Syria too. How much of a stain is that on her history for this job?
I mean, I think it's one of the biggest issues for people that are kind of critical and trying to think things over and skeptical of her right now. And I think that's probably going to be one of the main themes that she's going to get pressed on in that hearing. So yeah, I think it's going to be a major factor.
And I think the other thing that people are going to be pressing her on, especially from the Democratic side, is this willingness to bend intelligence to Trump, which is something that the Democrats believe is going to be the appeal to Trump of officials in that capacity. And I think there's going to be some pretty tough questions on that. And what Tulsi Gabbard's challenge is going to be convincing people who are skeptical about her as Republicans that she can answer Democrats' questions. The Republicans might well be waiting to see how she performs on TV. And as we know, there's only one viewer really in all this world, and it's Trump.
Well, I hope it is a very contentious hearing because I think she is the exact wrong person to take on this role. And you know, I welcome I welcome tough questions from anyone to any of these nominees, as tough as it gets.
Well, Sam, you know where to come for the drama. We will be reporting on it. Juliegrace will be there witnessing it.
Yes.
And I don't think there's any better place to find the drama than the Daily Beast.
Chris Butler should have been the name of my American Boy doll. No wonder he changed his name.
Jagad Guru.
That's perfect. Jagad Guru.
Yeah, the good news is she has a spiritual advisor. The bad news is it's Jagad Guru.
Oh, boy.
Okay, we are moving on. But before we do, we're taking a short break. Juliegrace, thank you so much. That was excellent.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was wonderful.